Hi everyone, this is acyuta-bhava from Nightlight Astrology, and today I'm going to be talking about the new moon in the sign of Cancer. Now, I've already covered some elements of what I'm about to cover in some previous talks that I did last week, especially the talk that I did on the Sun opposite Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn. So if you go back and watch that video, you may learn a few extra things that I won't probably mention, or I won't at least talk about as much as I did in that video. What I want to do today is just talk about this new moon in Cancer and give you a few ideas about what you might notice given this moon cycle, and especially given the presence of the opposition from the Sun and the Moon to Saturn across the Cancer and Capricorn axis. All right, so let me show it to you on the screen first. For those of you who are in Michigan, I am still in the Midwest hanging out with my mother, and we just made the big announcement on my birthday on July 16th that my wife and kids and I will be moving back home for us to Minnesota this year. So that was kind of big news. If you follow me on Facebook or Instagram, you probably saw me mention that. But this has been a really interesting new moon to consider for me because well, not only this new moon, but this recent eclipse cycle, because it was about 19 years ago that I left Minnesota after growing up in Minnesota. And so about 19 years later, with the completion of a round of eclipses dating back to 18 years or so ago when they were in Cancer and Capricorn, that was when I left Minnesota. A full eclipse cycle later, and I'm going back to Minnesota. And my wife was born in Minnesota, and I was not born in Minnesota, but lived there from the time I was 4 years old through about 21, 22 years old. So yeah, so it's just really interesting to see how things are coming full circle right now. I was born, of course, with the Sun and Moon in Cancer and Capricorn, which is the sign axis of this new moon and this new moon's opposition to Saturn. And also we've had eclipses in Cancer and Capricorn for the last year and a half, and they're just finishing now. So it's just really interesting that the potential of moving back to Minnesota, back home to the Midwest, occurred for us about a year ago in July, as Mercury was retrograde in Cancer and as there were eclipses happening across the Cancer Capricorn axis. So a full year later of meditating and praying about it, and coming full circle. Now, normally I wouldn't just indulge in a lot of conversation about the ins and outs of my personal life. I like to share stories here and there when it's appropriate, because if there's some way in which my life story can help illustrate the astrology, then I find that it's really helpful. In this case, what's so interesting about this is that you have the Cancer and Capricorn cycle coming to a close after about a year and a half. Now, if you go, if you want to date this back, and this is not an eclipse that we're dealing with, but this new moon is the final lunar toning, the last lunar cycle of Cancer and Capricorn that has included eclipses. And so it really is bringing things to a close. Now, if we go back, let's go back a little ways, and I'll tell you right about the time when the nodes of the moon basically change signs. And that is going to happen, what is it? This is back in 2018. I'm going by days, that's why it's not going. Here we go. So you see the nodes at about 0 Leo and 0 Aquarius by November of 2018, and then by late November of 2018, they change signs. They go into Cancer and Capricorn. Now that's, sort of on a technical level, that's the nodes of the moon changing signs. Officially, we're getting eclipses all the way up until very recently. The nodes of the moon just changed signs again in June, late May, early June of 2020. But we have then had some residual eclipses falling in proximity to the nodes out of sign, and the last eclipses, technically speaking, in Cancer and Capricorn. We had a solar eclipse right around the summer solstice in Cancer. Then we had the lunar eclipse in Capricorn on the 4th of July, and now one last new moon in Cancer to kind of close out the cycle. So if you can get down with this right there, let's just circle it so you can see it. So it is bringing to a close things that have been going on since the late part of 2018. It's really useful if you go back to the late part of 2018 to start thinking about what was happening. So, for example, and I'm going to use my own story again here just because I think it illustrates so nicely, because I was born with the Cancer Sun and Capricorn Moon. So, and I was born with a lunar eclipse in Capricorn. So, back in 2018, my wife and I were basically realizing that we, having two kids and managing a yoga studio in addition to her herbal school and my astrology practice and so forth, was too much. And so we basically started committing to closing our yoga studio within a year. We ended up closing it during, as these eclipses started coming through, we ended up closing the yoga studio and then deciding that we were going to move to kind of press reset. Been 10 years in Maryland and kind of finished a chapter in our life, it felt like. So my wife, of course, is a Cancer rising, right? So this is across her first and seventh house axis. And so it's a lot about, her identity changing as she wanted to become a little bit more focused on being a mom. Of course, being a full-time yoga studio owner, manager, having an herbal school, etc., was a lot in addition to wanting to be a mom. So she kind of toned down her work a bit so she could focus more on being a mom. We closed the yoga studio. So in both of our charts, this all started happening as the eclipses started coming through in late 2018. We closed the yoga studio by the late 2019, and then let's see, just around that time, we were thinking different possibilities of where we might move. And then this summer, we, just recently, as this whole cycle finished up, we then made the decision to go back to Minnesota, where we're both from. We both have family in the area, relatively close to the area. So I would highly recommend tracing that same cycle out, especially if you have Capricorn or Cancer in your first or seventh houses, 10th or fourth houses, because those houses are going to be more activated, generally speaking, because they're angular houses. So go back to the end of 2018. What was starting to change in your life around that time? What kind of cycle, or think of a chapter change in a book where the drama tension of the chapter is culminating and you're about to turn that page and go, okay, new chapter. So you're reading a novel or something, or it's like an act, a 3-act play. At the end of an act, stage goes dark, next act is starting. Just imagine that since late 2018, you've been going through that kind of chapter change. Trace out the developments. You can also look at the houses if you don't have Cancer and Capricorn on the angles of your chart, 1, 7, 10, or 4. Then you can chart the topics of the houses as well, by virtue of whatever whole sign houses Capricorn and Cancer fall into. Now, new beginnings are marked by solar eclipses. So this is a new beginning that is not just any new beginning. It's opposite Saturn, which means that it is whoops, got circles flying all over the place. All right, here we go. It's not just any new beginning, it's a new beginning that is marked by death, that is marked by loss, that is marked by the darkening of the light, or that is marked by a sense of sadness, sobriety, also maturity and wisdom. For example, for us, it's going to be really hard to leave friends. One of the reasons that we have decided to go back to the Midwest is to be closer to family, because in the midst of all of this, of course, my dad has been having some pretty serious health problems. So that's a sun moon conjoined, starting a new beginning, opposite Saturn. Starting to leave the past behind, or make that difficult, sobering choice that you have to make that's not easy. There's a tarot card that comes to my mind, which is, I believe, the 8 of Cups. We'll put a visual up of the card. In the 8 of Cups, there's a man basically climbing, or a woman climbing up a staircase, kind of like a mountainous scene, and the moon's out, and he's leaving some cups behind. There's, I want to say there's 8 cups, and they're all sort of sitting down, and he's walking away from them. kind of has that feeling right now of a sobering, difficult goodbye or of a letdown, but with some prospect for the future ahead. Prospect for the future of this um, astrological, of this lunar cycle, I should say. Ahead is the fact that there's this, big new moon that's coming at the end of these massive eclipses over the past year and a half. The sobering, difficult leaving of the past behind is the opposition to Saturn, Lord of Winter, Death, and Decay. This is also, in some ways, about the setting aside of, let's say, attachments, emotional immaturities. It's about difficult themes emotionally, perhaps connected to one's family or the past, and also the realities of death and change that happen in families generationally. Could be as simple as retirement. Sometimes it's a grandparent passing away or a family member that's ill. Um, of course, the reason I'm focusing on family and the generational topics are that Cancer is the sign of the moon. So these are some of the topics that could be really important right now. There's going to be some additional theme here because of the squaring presence of Mars. You'll notice that in between, from a 90-degree angle, you have Mars in Aries. Now, Mars in Aries is in the mix, suggesting not intensely in the mix because it's not by degree based. These planets are, so the sun and the moon have passed beyond the square to Mars. But there's some background here of conflict or confrontation or of potential crisis or something like that, kind of in the background that may play a big role. For example, again, I'm just using my own story. One of the things that informed this decision was the my father having a pretty serious health episode. So that Mars, that kind of acute act, do something, there's danger, there's confrontation, there's conflict, there's strife, there's some need to assert yourself or call up some courage and make a bold move. That's in the mix of all of this. And Saturn is also saying, look, this is a sobering moment. It's a new chapter, but it's we got to get our adult pants on for this one. So the other thing that's interesting to me about this new moon is that this new moon is also brought to you by Mercury, who's the morning star right now, and Mercury, of course, is the ruler of Venus. So Venus is finishing up her stay in Gemini during this lunar cycle, and at the start of the lunar cycle is disposed of by a morning star Mercury. This has the feeling of news or information coming to light, new decisions or new social strategies being implemented. For example, if you are someone who owns a business, I could see there being revisions done to a website or revisions done to marketing materials or some kind of revised marketing or PR strategy or some kind of redesign, or even some organizational some kind of organizational shift, a new strategy that could be lucrative or even potentially very lucky. This just has a Venus Mercury's well, I think, positioned right now to kind of because they're moving into an antitia with one another. So that's the main thing that I was looking at that I didn't even mention. So they're moving into this antitia, and you've heard me talk about an antitia before. They are a special kind of ancient aspect. I won't explain it now, but antitia means that there's a kind of secretive conjunction forming between them. And that's really good for mercantile things, for anything related to business, money, finances, advertising, communication, and finding allies and basically people or friends, or even lovers that somehow come into your life and act as an important ally, even if it's just for a minute. So that there is a feeling of that in the air right now. It is interesting to me that one thing that we're going to be visiting later in August, late August, will be the retrograde of Mars, which is happening in September, sort of getting ready for that. That's sort of like simmering in the background, but that is a big deal and will be, that should be a very interesting plot twist to consider in the months ahead. For me, like one of the things that I'm kind of almost anticipating from this lunation cycle is that there's this, the best feeling that I can describe is I remember I think I was a freshman in college, and or no, I guess I was a sophomore. I was a sophomore in college, and I went through this breakup, and I think I had been dating this girl for like 3 years, and I went through this really challenging breakup, and I remember basically being in my dorm room by myself after we actually broke up, and I was pretty much a wreck. And I remember thinking, I'm so relieved, and this is so difficult. And it's really interesting how that feeling can exist in us simultaneously sometimes. I'm so relieved. This is a new beginning that I really know I need, but I really don't like. I don't like it right now. And I think that that's the new beginning of the Sun Moon conjunction opposite Saturn after a long year and a half worth of eclipses in these signs. So it's a stoic moment, but one that will be emotionally rejuvenating in time. And it's just going to take a little time. But the sun's going to shift into Leo very quickly, where some searching for the noble-hearted response to this moment will be there for us. So, for example, when you go through a breakup like that, how do you pick yourself up off the mat and find some courageous new momentum or sense of confidence and strength in yourself to move forward again? Whatever this chapter change is, the feeling of needing to respond from the heart courageously and just move into that next chapter of your life, that should be a benefit of this new moon. So pretty quickly, both planets going to be passing into Leo, where you'll find that sense of the lion-hearted part of us wanting to show up and kind of help us through. But that's what I've got. I will be traveling home next week, and we'll be back home. I'm going to have to fix up an office. We're renting for a time, and just to make sure we want to actually settle down in Minnesota. So we're renting for a time back in the Twin Cities area, and I've got my bucket of blue paint. So I'm hoping that my landlord, whoever the landlord ends up being, will let me paint my office in my Krishna blue, and hopefully, we'll get a nice new setup for my videos there. Not sure when we're moving yet, but appreciate your prayers if you've got any to spare. And I hope you're all having a great July, and we'll be in touch again soon. Happy New Moon. Bye.